Hey folks, it's May of 2024, and I thought it's a good time to begin something I've been planning to do for a while. A monthly chronicle, a parallel run through time, based on what was going on 40 years ago. Back then, the world didn't seem as mournful and dangerous as it is now. This was a time when we were young and carefree, a time when everything seemed possible. Based on the dubious color tones of photos from the early 80s, you could get the impression that it was a dull and faded out world. It wasn't. I can assure you, everything looked just as crisp and just as clear as you see it around you now. And our parents didn't see the world in black and white either. In fact, it was the opposite. The world seems duller now than it looked like back then. For us kids, the grass was greener and the light was brighter, as would say Pink Floyd, but I didn't wait for the Division Bell song to notice that on my own. I'd also add that each single day brought new promise. The entire universe seemed open to our dreams, and you could feel all this energy around. At the dawn of personal computing, it was wonderful to discover new machines, new standards, and new games. So, today, we travel down memory lane, all the way back to May 1984. I had just turned 9. Memories of bubblegum and ice cream, of refreshing sodas and hot donuts, of stickers to collect, and pins and stamps and albums to fill, magazines, game books, board games, Legos, Playmobil, Smurfs, comics, cartoons, so many of them. And don't miss that show on TV. Only a few fortunate neighbors had a VCR to record what they wanted. Not us common people. I was too young for the Walkman, and the only music I listened to was my dad's, mostly songs of the 60s on vinyl records. Didn't like it too much back then. Silly me. The year before, I'd seen my first cinema film. The previous ones had been Disney movies. The first real film I saw at the cinema was Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. It was impressive, even though it's likely I didn't get it all. At this time, there was a general sense of freedom. No stress except for homework, no worrying about the future. Don't you miss that awesome feeling? Cars didn't smell the same. Less synthetic, more organic. Same thing for gasoline. It was not a foul smell. It was even kind of wholesome as compared to modern gas. Classic cars convey powerful memories of simpler times. As a rule, the smell of cigarettes, cigars, or pipes was omnipresent. Indoors or outdoors, no one cared. It was just normal. I didn't like it much, but was used to it. It became kind of reassuring. A smell that said, "Welcome home, weary boy." Adults around me were talking about the Cold War, about President Reagan, about the USSR. Europe divided in two blocks, West Germany, East Germany, and a big fat wall between them. I was 9, and it was less than a year since I played my very first video game. Could you imagine that? to first play on a screen at 8, when today's kids begin at 3. So let's assume we're back in the 80s. What does the computer world look like in May 1984? What do we see in stores, in the press? What do we hear about? Insanely quick changes in this rising industry. Technical revolutions everywhere. Just look! The Apple IIc has just been released. A slick, slender design which manages to embark everything the Apple II had, including the disk drive, but a completely closed architecture. Its cousin, the Macintosh, was released 4 months ago and is now the world's most wanted machine. Consumers dream about it, and computer manufacturers are learning from it, just like the Mac itself and its sister, the Lisa, learned from the groundbreaking features of the Xerox Star, which offered as early as 1981 such incredible things as graphical user interface, mouse, and desktop publishing. Microsoft perfectly understands what's at stake here. They just unveiled their first mouse, which is advertised as the perfect companion for a new word processor of theirs called Word. Just look at that handy little critter, as the ad says. The first version of Windows was still a year away, mind you. This is all about DOS. The PC is on the rise, but still far from dominating the home computer market. According to PC World magazine, 12% of computer owners have an IBM PC XT and 18% some other compatible. See? PC clones already sell more than the original as early as that. Most of them were compact, but Tandy was soon to come, and then the Taiwanese. IBM, who created a new standard in 1981 with its first PC, and widely adopted since, had been dominating until the attack of the clones. They were now anxious to regain control. They released the PC XT in 1983, and now they come back again with the PC Junior, which appeared a couple of months ago. It's still too early for predictions. Would people buy, or would they shun this new machine? The answer in the next episode. In May 1984, the headlines could also have read, IBM announces a compact clone. Indeed, IBM just released the PPC, or Portable Personal Computer, which is about the same size and weight as the compact competitor, and boasts a 9-inch amber display, integrated disk drives, and 256K of RAM for $2,795. That's about $8,000 today. In May 1984, we could see that 45% of all computer owners have a color display. %, have a dot matrix printer. The same percentage have 2 disk drives. 25% have a hard disk. But the most amazing stat, in my opinion, is that 44% have a modem. What's more, many reach the fantastic speed of 1200 baud. Hayes rules, US robotic is already around. In the early 80s, the online world was much more developed than we might think. People tend to imagine nobody used the internet before the World Wide Web appeared in the 90s, apart from some specific professions like scholars in the military. But yes, some everyday people also did. They were using bulletin boards, writing emails, and chatting in forums. One thing was different though, and this was age. These people were over 40 on average, as opposed to today's young adults, teenagers, or even kids for whom there's no world outside the online one. LAN networking is already well developed. Ethernet is the rule of the office.
The Amstrad 464.
In the UK, where the Spectrum and BBC Micro rule, a newcomer full of promises has just been announced. Amstrad, and its amazing CPC 464, which sells along with its screen and 64K of RAM at a bargain price. Will it succeed on the British market? Spoiler alert. It actually will, and beyond all hopes, taking Europe by storm in the coming year. In France, as the market has been hesitating for a few years between British Sinclair and US Commodore machines, the national manufacturer Thomson entered the fray with its TO7. This was a mixed success due to its awful rubber keyboard and rather limited capabilities, but Thomson was already preparing its next move with the TO770, which was about to be released. Meanwhile, Japan was experiencing its own computer revolution with the MSX, a whole new standard released by ASCII and Microsoft the year before, in which they were now trying to export worldwide. Their idea was to create a new range of perfectly compatible microcomputers to tap into the home markets. This was a promising concept if we consider the chaotic situation of computer norms and standards back then. The MSX was supposed to put that in order, as each manufacturer was to build on the same hardware and software basis. Would they succeed in imposing the new standard? No doubt there's a real opportunity for them, as they are followed by an impressive number of renowned manufacturers. Sony, JVC, Goldstar, Sanyo, Mitsubishi, Yamaha, Panasonic, Spectrum Video, Pioneer, Canon, Fujitsu, Kyocera, Sharp, Casio, Canon, Hitachi, Toshiba, Samsung, and the list goes on. The stage is set, and the fight will be hard for sure. In May 1984, less than a year after its release, the MSX is already creating turmoil in many corners of the world. Asia, of course, but also a large part of Europe, Brazil, and many developing countries. Yes, everyone was talking about it back then, at least in Europe, and I can tell you more about that since the MSX was to become my first computer later in the year. At this time, I still had no computer yet at home. The very first video game I played the year before was a memorable story. It's deeply imprinted in my mind as my very first experience with video games. I remember that scene perfectly, even though it occurred more than 40 years ago. I can tell you the story, but I hope I won't become too emotional. It was an ordinary day in 1983. I'd come to school early, the doors were still closed, and there was only one boy sitting by. No one else was around. I was very shy back then, so I decided to stand a few feet away from him. I certainly didn't want to engage in conversation, I just tried to ignore him. But then I realized the boy himself didn't pay any attention to me. He seemed utterly focused on something he held in his hands. At first, I thought it was a book, and then I heard strange sounds coming from it that didn't resemble anything I heard before. Pushed by curiosity, I got a little closer. The sound was coming from a strange, small orange case, which opened in two. Since the boy's attention was completely focused, and he was obviously not going to look away from this peculiar thing, I crept up as near as possible. And then I saw. There were two black and white screens with small figures moving in them. Then I noticed the boy was pushing buttons, and I understood this was some kind of game, although this was the first one of its kind that I ever saw. And then I understood why the boy was so completely into this game. It was fascinating. He only noticed as I sat next to him, but continued to play with this serious expression on his face. I don't remember what happened next. Surely the doors opened and the mysterious game box was put back in the boy's pocket. I didn't mind. I was so overwhelmed by a totally new feeling, like a portal had just opened to a whole new world, and I could jump through it. The game's name was Donkey Kong, one of the first in the Nintendo Game & Watch series. This episode marked the beginning of a 40-year passion. Sure, I've seen many amazing games during that time, but as a French songwriter Georges Brassens put in his song, talking about women, many others, no doubt, have come along since. Yes, but among all of those that you have known, she is the very last one who will be forgotten. The very first girl whom you took in your arms. Oh, I could say the same about video games. Remembering this strange experience in front of my school 40 years ago. So, that's what the computer world looked like in May of '84. Those were the days. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of This Month in Retro. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Remember to hit subscribe. Let's get to 1 million together. See you next time. And take care.